much, Molly, for really being willing to share about the readings that we've had. It's been such a pleasure meeting you, and I feel like a kinship with you, a friendship with you. And I think through meeting your people in spirit and just connecting with you. Before we get started, I want to let people know and kind of just add that you're a therapist. And I especially love feedback from therapist clients. And I know you're a very reputable therapist, and I can tell that you're very good at what you do, because in one of our connections at the end, I shared just a little snippet of something that was going on with me. I think I was preparing to take a trip, and you said something to me that was like so therapeutic and just perfect and exactly what I needed to hear. So I'm going to take the opportunity to thank you for that.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
And I should add to reputable, I feel like from the spirit side, I'll get these vibes, and we haven't connected in a therapeutic situation, but like spirit, my guides will like give me just this feeling like she's really good at what she does. You could like refer people to her, like that kind of thing. So I always feel like that's the best kind of like recommendation.
Yes.
Doing the reading, I remember getting that from spirit about these
Love
things.
that. Yeah.
So yeah. So why don't we start with just talking about, like we were just chatting before this about, you told me that we've had 3 sessions over a couple of years, and I'd love to hear you share maybe some evidential parts, like what was personal proof to you that I was connecting with your past loved ones.
I have so many stories. It'll be hard to choose but I'll just dive in. In our first session on Zoom, immediately my mother-in-law, who had just passed away, came through, referenced a conversation we'd had a couple days earlier, said she was with my husband. So my husband, Mark, who passed away 32 years ago, came through in that reading and has come through in every reading, has really been almost like a master of ceremonies, sort of bringing other people in. And you always, talk about him being very charming and handsome, and he's always got a cup of coffee. And I'm like, that's him, exactly. so in that first meeting, my mother-in-law came in, and there were several evidential things there that had just happened like 2 days before. And then my husband, Mark, and then Mark said he was bringing through a female friend. So my best friend from the day she was from day old, Michelle, had passed away a few months before this. And you said, Mark's bringing her through. She's waving like this in the background. And Michelle always did that to me. And then she talked about, being thankful that I was there when she died and that I was holding her hand and helped with medication. And some of those things I thought, well, this could probably be said to anybody in my age group. Anybody's probably lost a friend by now. And I spoke at her funeral. But then some things became so specific. And one of them was, and this is kind of funny, but it was very, very specific. You said that Michelle was showing you a newspaper. And you said, I don't feel like people read newspapers that much anymore. I said, but I do. Every morning I read the newspaper, I do the crossword puzzle. And you said, oh, well, your friend is saying that she likes your new glasses and she likes your teacup, but it looks like more of a coffee mug, but she's saying, no, it's a teacup. So 2 weeks before our reading, I had started using readers only to do the crossword puzzle in the morning. That's the only time I wear them. And my daughter had given me this coffee mug. Oh, and you said she likes it because it's like one color on the outside and then bright yellow on the inside. It's the only yellow thing I own. And so just nobody sees me in that setting, doing a crossword, wearing those glasses, drinking coffee out of this mug that she would have used for tea. But like my husband once in a while. So that was really specific. And then you had, in this, before we started, I stood in my house and I said out loud, whoever's going to come through, you're welcome. And I said, including you, Lynn. Well, Lynn was my current husband's first wife who had also died. And so at one point in our reading, you said, there's a woman here. She doesn't really want to talk, but she just wants you to know she's here. Her name is Lynn. And that was her name. And then you said, now there's like a father energy coming through, and he's tall and he's got a distended belly. I see smoke around him. And you said, and he's telling me, he doesn't know any of these other people here, because you said you have a lot of people that showed up, because I'd invited the whole world apparently. And so you said, this man says he doesn't know any of these people, but this is quite an adventure, isn't it? And then said his name was George. He died young, a few other things. And I finally snapped and realized my current husband's dad was named George. Now, I never met him on Earth, but you described him to a T, described his situation, his death, like a lot of, details. His wife's name came up. So that was all very startling and very specific also.
I
And in
love
that,
this, Molly, I don't want to interrupt you, but
that's
just,
okay, go ahead.
I forget details. So hearing you share this is like being able to relive that, connection again myself too.
Yeah, I didn't know how much you remember from past sessions. And so he was there, and then a man with a J name came through. Well, my first father-in-law had passed away a few months before, and you said he was at the wedding. My son had gotten married a couple months earlier. This was funny. So then you said there's another mother energy, but it's different than the one before. And once you got to talking, I realized it was my friend Michelle's mother, who was like a second mother to me my whole life. And I had, held her hand while she died, and I'd taken care of her those last few days and dripped morphine and water into her mouth. And so she referenced those things. And then you said, she's here with a man, but she called him a dick. And I said, oh, her husband's name was Dick. His name was Richard, and everybody called him Dick.
Ask Molly, now, would she be known for her sense of humor?
A little, not really, but occasionally,
okay.
Sure. Occasionally. Okay. Yeah. But she would have called him Dick for sure.
Yeah.
But it just seemed, like you weren't sure what to think of that at first. I was like, that's his name.
Yeah.
Because he was like a father to me also.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
And then in that, sorry, go ahead.
No, keep going.
And then in that session also, so then eventually I feel like a couple other people came through, but then my husband, Mark, said, okay, it's his turn now. He saved the best for last. And I had, on your suggestion, I had written down questions before our session. And a lot of my questions were around his death, because he died in a plane crash and we really didn't know what happened or why they crashed. And so the whole family, of course, has always, wondered. That haunts us. And so I had written down several questions, and you said, well, Mark says he knows you have questions about his death. He doesn't really think about it a whole lot. He doesn't remember it a lot, but he's going to try to answer your questions. And then really did, to a large degree. You described the exact scene that he was flying in. You described that he had someone else with him. You brought up a possible health issue that I don't know about this, but it would explain a lot, that his left arm was hurting, and that made me wonder, could he have had a heart attack? Or so when I wondered that. Now, earlier in the session, you told me you and your husband are so bonded that it's hard to tell where his thoughts leave off and yours begin. Well, then when you were describing the arm, his arm was hurting when he was flying. And I thought, I didn't say it, but I thought in my head, oh, could Mark have had a heart attack? And then you immediately said, oh, no, he says it wasn't a heart attack.
Oh.
So
that's so interesting. So I said that while you were thinking it.
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's so
that
cool.
was wild.
He knew. And Spirit always knows, but it always amazes me, even just hearing that.
And you've, in all three sessions, Mark has said things like he's always with me, that I can hear him. And one thing you said in one of our sessions that was very moving to me was that he said he doesn't miss hugging me and our children because he does it all the time.
Oh.
And that was really sweet. So that, and you kind of told me, when you feel something and you think, could that be Mark? It's 1,000% probably him.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love how, like I said, I forget the details. So I love hearing all this. There are certain things that stay with me. Like I do remember him, the details, or him going through details of his passing, because it's almost as if like he put me in a remote viewing situation. So
Yeah.
that's just something that my mind will sometimes, at least it'll trigger that memory and I'll go, oh yeah, I remember that, almost like I'm back there, what
Mhm.
spirits brought that to me. But what I do remember, Molly, is the love. Like I will remember that. And so like even after our first session or when we connected again, I would have remembered like how close like he felt to you. And not only that, but like we didn't know each other before, like,
Right.
right? Like you
Right.
booked this
No, we
meeting
didn't.
and we didn't like anonymously, right? Like we didn't know each
Right.
other.
Right.
But
No, you
what
didn't
I
know
do
anything about me
remember,
before we met. Yeah.
yeah, and these are the kind of things I will remember. What I do remember is that feeling like, oh, he's very comfortable with her. They're very much connected, even before like you came to me. I knew like this was going to be a reading that he was going to give you the validation that he wanted to bring, but also too that you felt connected to him even before you came to me. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's very comforting to me to hear. Like, I love hearing that.
Yeah, I figured you would. I felt like prompted to share that
Mhm.
aspect of that, remembering that and that staying with me. It's like the emotion, the love, the closeness. I'll remember that, and that will stay with me as being very
Yeah.
special when somebody's had that. And then you sharing too how long it had been since he passed
Yeah.
and like how very present he still is in your life and your children's, like
Mhm.
makes it all
Yeah.
the more special.
Yeah. And he is very, I mean, we talk about him a lot. And and since our readings, like I'm just more sort of conscious of like, oh, he's right here. Like I just feel like he's around me now. And I just like that's comforting. And so I'm gonna take it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Going back real quick, and I want you to share maybe a story about Mark. Like, I
Yeah.
would love to, and I'm sure people watch this will love to hear about him too.
Yeah.
He always comes through to me as like you said, the MC, like charming, bringing people together, connecting people, big
Yeah.
helper, all of that. Um, but going back to your mother-in-law, how when you said she had passed recently, how soon was it that she had passed
Like
before?
within the week.
Okay, that's what I was wondering when you said a couple of days before we had a conversation. I was like, wow,
Mhm.
okay, to remember that. And I think that really speaks to let people know too, how quickly spirit is okay, how quickly our loved ones are okay,
Yeah.
and how well they
Yeah.
can communicate just like that, right? So I always love
Yeah.
for people when yeah, learning that like and how oh yeah, just a couple of days ago we were here talking, not just
Mhm. Well, and you
very
hear stories about people who have a loved one pass and then they have a dream about them the next night, or they have even a vision of them sitting at their
yes.
bedside. Like that happens so frequently. And I did have a dream about Mark the night after. So he died on a Friday afternoon. We didn't know it until Saturday morning when his wreckage was found. And then that Saturday night, I had a dream where he came home. He just walked in the front door and sat down in the living room and was like, oh, you won't believe the crazy day I had. I went on this flight and my friend and I went flying and we were going inverted over the river and blah, blah, blah. And then he was trying this aerobatic maneuver. And it was just like he kind of started to pass out from it. And so in the dream, I was thinking, oh, he doesn't know he's dead. I'm going to have to tell him he's dead. And I woke up then. But it was a very, I've had two real vivid dreams about him, and that
Wow.
was the first one. Yeah.
Wow, I love that. So he right away, and you say it's been 32 years?
32 years this
32
week.
years.
Yeah.
He right away, like let you know, like he was still right
Mhm.
there.
Yeah, yeah. And
Oh,
then in the reading, you said he tried to connect with me in a dream 3 years before our reading. And I had a very vivid dream where I had walked into the house we lived in when he died, and everything was redecorated in bright colors and beautiful tropical plants. And there was music playing, and I could smell food cooking. And I walked in and was like, what's going on? And then Mark came just walking over from the side of the room, and he came over and he just like took me in his arms, smiling, and he kissed me. And then he said, oh, I wasn't sure I was going to remember how to do that.
oh,
And then I looked over at the table, and it was set with beautiful dishes and candles, and our wedding rings were all polished and shiny and sitting on the table together. And he had made me a meal, which is something he would have done, in life.
oh,
And
that's beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It's really stuck with me because it was so vivid.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you'd like to share, maybe a story about Mark?
No, I have so many.
So many,
I
right?
can't even decide. Here, I'll show you a picture of him and I'll
Oh, yeah,
scroll
perfect.
through a couple of pictures of him, maybe. Um, let's see. Oh, that's him holding one of our puppies.
Oh,
That's him holding my hand while I gave birth to our daughter, and he looks terrified.
I love the black and white contrast.
Yeah. This is an article that was in the paper when he died.
Yeah.
He loved flying, his whole life. That's him and his brother, and that's him.
So handsome.
Beautiful Albuquerque sunset. Yeah.
Oh,
He was an actor. He made a living as a mechanic, an airplane
oh,
mechanic.
I don't know if I knew he was an actor.
Yeah, well, yeah, he was in high school and then he wanted to be a professional actor. And oh, that's weird. Huh, I don't know what's going on with my computer, but yeah, that's him and our son when he was
Oh,
a
sweet. That's
baby.
precious.
Yeah, potty training our daughter.
Aw.
So he
Look what
was,
a hands-on dad it looks and sounds like you.
yes, he was. And so, but he was the life of every party. He
Yeah.
was hilariously funny. He was charming. He was handsome. All the girls wanted to date him and all the boys wanted to be him. He was like that, kind of person. He certainly had his demons, though, like most of us do. And some of those we discussed in our sessions, that he kind of explained some things and apologized for some things, that he had done, while he was alive here. And that felt good. That gave me a little bit of closure, isn't the right word, but, sort of.
Yeah.
But he was just such, one of those people that everybody wanted to be his best friend. And when he died, I think there were 700 people showed up at his funeral.
Wow.
And 2 weeks before, well, let's see, 2 weeks before he died, he and our two kids went on our one and only family vacation to Durango, Colorado. And he used to go up there every year with some friends on a motorcycle trip. And he loved the bar at the Strater Hotel, because he would always go in there and they had a woman that played piano and he would always ask her to play Rhapsody in Blue,
Oh.
but she would be playing like Old West tunes. So the kids and I were there with him 2 weeks before he died, and we're walking down the street and he stopped me in front of the Strater and he said, "Molly, if I die and you want to get hold of me, you should come up here because I'm going to haunt this bar."
Oh my gosh.
And so, of course, we haven't been there in a while, but especially at first, every year I would take the kids up there. We'd go have a Shirley Temple at the bar and have toast daddy. And one time, my daughter and I were walking through the lobby of the hotel and there was some kind of music playing. And halfway through the lobby, it stopped and switched to Pachelbel's Canon, which is what he used to like dance her to sleep with every night when she was a
Oh,
baby. And we both just stopped dead in our tracks. And Megan was only about 8 years old. And she turned to me and she said, "Mom, the signs are everywhere. You just have to listen."
oh, oh my goodness, Molly.
Yeah.
What
And
a powerful and a story of your connection, really. And
yeah.
I don't myself understand or claim to understand how it all works. But as you were saying that, and for when Mark said, if I die, come here, and then the way it was, all the signs you got, and that was like, it was almost like the soul, like his soul was already giving you, like prompting you kind of like what to do that would comfort you later. Do you feel that way at all?
Yes, I do. Also, the week before he died, out of the blue one day, asked me what I remembered about my father, who had died when I was a little girl. And I said, "Oh, I remember doing this and that with him." And he said, "I need to do something special with Megan so she'll have good memories of me."
Ah,
And so he took her out for a little daddy-daughter date for dinner. That was 2 days before he died.
wow, wow. And to me, Molly, hearing your story, like just really validates to how the soul knows, even when a passing is unexpected. Like,
Yeah.
spirit always knows, the soul knows. And like for your husband, who was healthy and young, to say that, just
Yeah.
2 days before his passing, I think is very profound.
He also told me around that time, his grandmother was in a nursing home, and the two of them were especially close. And she's come through on one of our readings too, and
Okay.
acknowledged that. But he also said to me one night, he said, you know, my grandma's going to die soon, and I'm not going to survive her death. And she died the day after him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
there were those three things that he said in those weeks right before his death.
Wow. That's very profound. And it
Yeah.
kind of reminds me of, like, I feel like when babies are born and how close spirit is and how spirits all gathered around, and how I feel like even though they can't communicate, are very much connected to their souls. And I believe that happens at the end of our lives, even regardless of how we're going to pass, that we can become more connected to the spirit side. And it certainly sounds like Mark was, from that story, and knowing that, like, his grandmother was going
Mhm.
to
Yeah,
die.
and I've attended several deaths. I'm a death doula, and every death I've attended, at some point, the person in the day before they die has, like, all of a sudden opened their eyes, or sat up in bed, or reached for somebody and said, "Hi, Mom," or "What are you
Wow.
doing here?" Or those. And I know that other hospice workers talk about experiencing that, but I've experienced it every time.
Wow. Okay. Now I want to have a whole separate conversation about your death doula experience.
Yeah. We should
That would
team
be
up.
really cool. Yes, for sure. I certainly have felt that the maybe need for mediumship that isn't as accessible or
Mhm.
get recognized when people are at the end of their lives, how that
Yeah.
can bring the family comfort. And I know, Molly, that you're connected, and I'm sure that spirit directs you. Are you ever conscious of feeling or sensing spirit around when you're working as a death doula?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. I do. I can't say a specific reason, but I just know there's something about when you're with somebody in those final hours of their life, to me, just feels so profound, and it's like such an honor to be with
Mm.
somebody at the end of their life. I'm also a birth doula, and
Oh,
and
okay.
I really love both, and it's kind of a nice bookend, I feel like.
I love that.
um
So no
yeah,
coincidence, the birth analogy, right?
yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I would love to hear stories about both of those. And I kind of feel, as you're saying that, like, probably in both situations, birthing and at the end of one's life, like, that connection, like, you automatically know what to do, what to say, when to say it, and how to be there for the family.
Mm-hmm. And there's something to me about being with someone while they're dying, that you lose all pretense,
Mhm.
and you don't have time to say a lot. So you're just going to speak the truth, and you're just going to say things that are necessary and important and comforting, and there's, yeah, I've found it very rewarding to do that.
Oh, I can imagine. So I it- had an experience, well, maybe 10 years ago now, where I didn't have the words to articulate, I didn't have the awareness that I do now, but now I know that spirit had guided me to be at someone's bedside as she was dying, and it was a
Yeah.
friend of the family. And so I know what you mean. I totally, that resonates with me.
Mhm.
You expressed that beautifully.
Yeah, I know, I was my friend Michelle, who I talked about earlier. So I was with her. I took care of her in the months before she died, and I held her while she died. And she, that afternoon, she'd been unresponsive for hours, and she suddenly just sat up and went, oh, and like reached for somebody. And so that was interesting. And then
Wow.
when she actually, like, the moment she died, I thought I saw like a wisp of gray smoke come right out of her chest and go up. And at the time, I just thought, I'm really tired. And, I didn't think too much of it. Well, then I read somewhere that that's a thing that people experience. And so when you were talking to her, you were describing the scene of her death, and you kept saying, and she just left her body. She just left her body. And
Oh, was I making that motion?
you were making this hand motion that was
Yeah.
exactly like I had seen this
Yeah.
wisp of smoke. Yeah.
And that's not typical. That's not something I recall,
Yeah.
coming through or expressing it like that before. No.
Yeah. That was interesting. Yeah.
Very, very, yeah,
Yeah.
no coincidence
So
there.
that was just all in our first reading. There was more, like one funny thing in our second one, we couldn't get Zoom to work. We both had technological problems. So we got on the phone. And so I was sitting
Oh
in
yes, I remember
I wrote
that.
this. I'm sitting in my sunroom and I'm keeping notes in this journal that I use just for our sessions. And you said, well, your husband's taking me down a long hallway or something with a red wall that has white trim. And I was like, no, we don't have a hallway like that. And you said, huh, well, he's showing me, he likes to see you in the room with all the windows where you write about him in your journal. And I was like, no, I don't really do that. You're like, he's showing me like a coffee table, kind of a classic coffee table. And he says you need to straighten the painting on the wall. And I was like, I don't know. I'm not getting any. And then you said, he says to tell you, look around, look around. And I was like, oh, he's just exactly described where I'm sitting at this moment. There's
Oh my
the long
goodness.
red wall. There's the coffee table his uncle built. There's the painting that's falling out of the frame. And I'm writing in my journal and there are windows all over. It was like so funny. Because I was overthinking it, I guess, because he was just describing my setting where I was at that moment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and if I started with he's walking down a hallway, he was probably showing me himself being there and walking down the hall. And that's probably
Yeah.
taking you somewhere else in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
makes sense.
I would
Yeah.
say it's so interesting how it's very individual and how people express in their own way, like their validations and how they're with you. I love that, Molly.
Yeah. And that session was a lot of him talking about our relationship, talking about our kids, said some really specific things like he likes Megan's new glasses and tell her to get her brakes fixed, and her brakes needed fixing.
Oh, wow.
There were just like
Love
little
that.
fatherly things like
Yeah.
that.
I love what a dad thing that is. Yeah.
That was funny. And then my mother came through in that visit. And that was really, I'd really had hoped she would.
Okay.
Because in life, she wouldn't have partaken of any of this. Because I think it conflicted with her spiritual views, or she thought that it did.
Sure.
So I didn't know. But she came through, talked a lot about our relationship and things that had been difficult between us. She really specifically referenced, like, she knows she was tough on you about this certain thing, but it's because of a way she was treated. She
Oh,
was very beautiful. And she said to you that she was treated a certain way because of her looks, and she didn't want it to happen to me.
oh,
And so we didn't get exactly what that meant, but that tied right into a whole theme between us. And she talked about planting flowers with my current husband on the porch in an Easter egg shaped vase, which is exactly on our porch. Like, we've got two vases and they look just like Easter eggs.
oh, I love it.
Yeah. Her best friend popped in and said, Elaine says hi. And I loved Elaine. Yeah. And so that one was also like great. Mark, and twice now, Mark has said that he wants to hand our daughter Megan a bundle of joy that is 9 months old with dark curly hair.
Huh.
And she says she has no intention of having babies, but I keep telling her,
Yeah.
I think there's a granddaughter waiting.
Yeah. And the black curly, this wouldn't be a fur baby, would it? 9 months
It
old.
could be. It could be. Yeah, we don't know, but two
I
different.
don't know why, but when you said black curly hair before I knew what you're going to say, I would envision a little fur baby. But
Maybe it's my puppy.
no coincidence, Molly. I just got some feedback today from a client who happened to mention, but you also mentioned a baby, but we don't know yet, in October. And I replied that babies, it's so fascinating to me when our loved ones want to validate a baby coming, because babies seem to be like, it's, I don't do predictions, but if they bring it through, they're very specific about maybe a time of year or a detail like the black curly hair, right?
Yeah.
But it feels more like it's like a destiny thing, right? Like if a baby or fur baby is going to come, it's destined. But the time frame is challenging. And I told her how I heard from a client recently who told me 4 years ago, I told her loved one said that twin grandbaby girls are coming, and she emailed me to say I didn't think that was right because it was 4 years ago, and we just found out that my son's wife is expecting twins and they're girls.
Oh,
I was like 4 years ago. Wow.
wow, that's a long way back.
So I need to express that in the readings. Like, I don't know the time frame, but
But this is what I'm hearing.
yeah, it's a little different than those choices that involve our free will that they see. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
like, it seems like the more destined something is, the more they just put it out there, but yet the time
Mm.
frame might be ambiguous, you know?
Yeah, 4 years. So it was in works for a while.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I had to say that because I literally just had that conversation with another client this morning. So
Funny.
when you said that, I'm like, uh-oh,
I know I got really excited for a minute,
there's
but
another
she's like, I
baby
don't
we're
think it's
waiting
going to
for
happen,
and getting our
Mom. Just
hopes up.
calm down.
So
Well,
I'm
and
gonna
it,
say I'll get an email from you or a call or something one day,
oh,
right?
oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, so another interesting thing happened after our first session. My stepdaughter, I told her all about this and she was very excited and she booked a session with you pretty soon. And I don't think you knew that there, I'm sure you did not know there was any connection between the two of us.
No.
So in her session, her mother came through. And at one point you said to my daughter, Jen, you said, do you know someone named Molly? And she laughed and said, yes, I do. And she said, well, your mom says, ask her about Molly, then she'll know it's really me.
I do remember that because your stepdaughter at the end told me like she was your stepdaughter, and I was like mind blown because then I'm
Yeah.
going, oh, wait a minute, that was Molly's person too. And that was, you know, it's so,
Mhm.
so cool. But
And then
I do
her
remember.
brother-in-law has come up in 2 of my sessions, and he's had a session with you, Doug.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
So in another interesting thing that came up in 2 of our sessions, like my father came through a little bit, and then I had a sister who died 13 years before I was born. And her name was Carrie. And so she has come through in every session. A little girl, dark, you described her dark hair, freckles, light eyes, dressed like she's from the 1950s, which is when she died. And so that was really interesting because I don't think that much of having a relationship with her, but in that session you said, oh, she's always around you. And I was like, I never really thought about that much. But then also in 2 separate sessions, she referenced a little boy who died in our family, like a stillborn or miscarriage. And then in the 3rd session, my father referenced the same thing, that there was a boy. And I have no way of verifying it, but that was really interesting too.
That is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. It's always fascinating to me, those soul connections with family members who have been alongside us, yet haven't lived in the physical life with us. But it makes
Yeah.
sense to me because Fear's always saying in readings, like, I reunited, I've met grandpa who I didn't know here. And there's this familiarity they have. Like, as soon as their souls are
Mhm.
reunited, they know each other, you
Yeah.
know? So I feel
Well,
like that was that way with your sister as well. Like, you'll see where she was with you.
yeah. Yeah. That was very sweet to hear because I mean, I grew up knowing about her, of course, but she never felt real to me exactly, so that was
Oh, I
really
love that.
nice.
I love that.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
goodness.
And then our 3rd session was mostly like one of my uncles who had passed away that year came through just briefly. Um, my brother-in-law who had just passed away came through, my mother, and of course, Mark, and talked more about our relationship and, things that were challenging for us while he was alive. And he kind of acknowledged them. And so I felt a little bit of, forgiveness and acknowledgement that felt good to
Oh, good.
hear. Yeah. And then a friend of mine who had died I lost 36 people in the last 2 years.
Oh, that's like unfathomable.
Yeah, not all of them were real close, but about 6 were like immediate circle of family and friends. And one of those friends came through and referenced a conversation she and I had about you because I had told her about these sessions. And
Oh my goodness. Okay.
yeah, and so then she came through in our session and referenced one of those conversations. So like,
It's always trippy, right?
yes, I know. So now if I know anybody who's dying, I always tell them, look for Rachel, look for Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you, Molly. And really, trippy in a good way, it really brings the reality of their existence home, right? When they're saying these things that are so personal and connected to both of us. That is so
Yeah,
cool. I was just, as you're sharing, I'm sitting here thinking, gosh, how grateful your loved ones and spirit must be that you've given them the opportunity, to
oh, I hope
communicate
so.
and that,
I have so many more things that I want to ask them. And, one of the things I told my husband, Craig, who's here on earth, I said, I want, like, over the years, I've watched like Tyler Henry and different medium shows. And I always think, like, people always, like, they don't ever ask the big questions, like, so should I be going to church, and which one, and like, what happens when we die? People always ask, like, where's grandma's necklace, or
yeah, right.
and then after our first session, I was like, well, I did the same thing. Like, now I need to go back and ask the big questions, right? I need some
Yeah,
more
yeah.
guidance.
Oh, I love that, Molly. And I love too, and I don't know if you've noticed this in our readings. Of course, you have a lot of people that have passed. So it sounds like very mediumistic, the readings. And sometimes people, they'll, our loved ones will start bringing through guidance, or it'll kind of evolve into guidance. And sometimes
Mhm,
they'll address the bigger questions we have. If and when, I feel like too, there's always a little bit of mystery, right? It's
mhm.
sometimes people will ask big questions or deep questions. And I find spirit speaking through me in ways that I'm always like, oh, I should write this down. This is so profound. But then I realize they're not answering maybe in the way the person was intending for them to. It's more of conceptual,
Mhm,
and maybe
mhm,
because it's too broad or too specific in a way that our human minds wouldn't be able to understand or
mhm.
wrap around. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all, but
Yeah, there was at one point in one of our readings, there was something, I can't remember what it was, but there was something that we were talking to Mark about, and I was like, but I don't, how does that work? And and he told you, just don't even try it to get it right now. You'll understand when you get here.
yeah,
Like, okay.
yeah, the perfect example from Mark. Yeah. And I do feel
Yeah.
like even when they use analogies and these kind of profound metaphors and things, it's still not exactly maybe an answer we were thinking of or specific for
Mhm.
us, but yet what we need to know, right? It's
Yeah.
like I feel like they know what we need to know, and give us that, even if it's not what we would like to know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and then
Yeah.
sometimes you'll say something in a reading and I won't connect with it, but then later, hours later, I'll be thinking, oh, now, oh, of course that makes sense. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
always make sense in the moment, but then later it will come to me. And my daughter experienced that too. She called me crying the next day because she said, I feel so bad because I told her none of it was making sense, but now it all makes sense.
Oh. I always want to reassure people when that happens that they know that, and they'll bring different things through if something isn't connecting or connecting in the moment. And that
Mhm.
names are a big thing because names will come through and somebody will later say, oh, I'm so sorry, my aunt was Kathy and I feel bad that I ignored her. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
they know. If they wanted, if Kathy wanted to step forward, she would have, but she just wanted to know she was around.
Yeah.
It's like they
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But oh my goodness, this
So
has been one.
tomorrow is Dia de los Muertos. Do you get any special activity or feelings or anything come
It's
through?
so interesting because the same client that had to tell me about the validation and also that they don't know about the baby yet, asked me about that. And it's so hard to know because most of my work is with people who are grieving. And so for me, it's like every day, right? So I
Yeah.
have clients every day. So maybe if I step back a little bit, I would notice a difference in the energy in
Yeah.
that. But
Mhm.
I kind of feel like too, it has to do with maybe people are more collectively open and
Yeah.
people are more thinking about their loved ones more or
Mhm.
more open to spirit connection more this time of the year, I
Yeah.
think
That makes
collectively,
sense.
and so I think that's why the energy is probably more open and we're able to discern the presence of the spirit world, our loved ones, maybe more because of that.
Mhm.
But I also believe, Molly, like with you, like when people already have that personal relationship and connection, that belief and that knowing that their loved ones are around, I don't know if it's is profound for them, like,
Mhm.
or how do you, so maybe I should ask you, do you feel like Mark or your loved ones around more now or this time of the year?
No, I don't. I mean,
Yeah.
well, in a sense, what's weird for me is that Mark died on October 26th. And
Oh, okay.
so
You're
this
right.
whole, week around here, and also my husband Craig, his first wife died 4 days before that, on October 22nd, the same
Okay.
year. And so our whole family would be very shaky, in October in general, but especially this week. And so I always brought my kids up to think, just feel it, just go with it and experience it. And let's get the photo albums out and let's cry and it'll be okay because
Yeah.
we're going to feel better next week, and we would. So he's always just on my mind a lot this week anyway.
Sure. So maybe hard to discern what it is this time of the year. So in a way it is his day, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too, the holidays, and how I reply to my client too, like with my personally on a personal level with Perry, my son, he loved Halloween. So I might
Mm,
get more signs or feel his presence more, but I don't know if it's because it's the season collectively, or
mhm.
it's because he liked it. So it's more about that personal
Yeah.
connection, I believe.
And you're
And
thinking
going into
about
the
his love of
holidays.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
if you like, for me, the veil, as they say, the veil is thin,
Yeah.
is probably really more between Thanksgiving and Christmas, because that's when I get so many people wanting to connect, because that's kind of universally when people tend to miss their loved ones more.
Oh, yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think because I do connect mostly with people who are wanting that personal connection, I don't necessarily notice a different time now. But I do find people asking me, people who don't know me as a medium and didn't know me and as just as Rachel, or in a different light as
Mhm.
line dancer or instructor or
Yeah.
something like that, they tend to be more open and they will ask. And so I might get little hits or pop-ins more this time of the year, but it's because their people are more open and asking me, versus like other times of the year when people aren't as open. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, that does
Yeah.
make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that question though.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I think it's such a cool holiday. And
I do too.
I
And I
never
actually went to my
understand.
first party this year, but
Oh,
somebody
did
had,
you?
and then now I want to do it every year, even if I have to throw my own. And it was really cool. And I made cookies that my son used to make and took a picture of him.
Oh,
And it truly was like a celebratory party. And I love that. I thought,
oh
my goodness,
man.
I've been doing this.
Yeah, my husband Craig went down to Oaxaca for Dia de los Muertos a few years ago, and he said it was just like a giant party for about 4 days straight. And it's funny because when I'll talk to some people about this holiday, and they'll say, "Oh, that sounds terrible. Why would you want to celebrate your loved one's death?" I'm like, "No, you're celebrating their life. You're celebrating them."
Exactly.
And
Exactly. To me, it's the holiday when people are actually open about bringing them in and making it about them. Where other holidays, it's like, we don't know if we might make people uncomfortable saying their name. So is
right.
right.
Have
So
you watched the movie Coco?
yes.
Oh,
Yes.
love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. Me too. Well,
Yeah.
we should celebrate it together sometime.
Yes, I
Well,
would
we
love
gotta
that
meet in
so
person
much.
sometime.
Yes, we're going to because we're just stayed apart. And
Okay.
I've decided I'm retiring next summer. So
Oh.
that's going to open up my travel calendar. And my daughter lives in Marana, which isn't far, I think, from where you live. And so,
Oh, no.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know exactly where it's
it's
not far.
it's just northwest of Tucson. So
Okay.
and one of my best friends lives in Phoenix, so in Mesa.
Yeah.
So yeah.
In between Phoenix and Tucson,
Hmm.
Marana. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Well, we'll have to talk more about
Yes, I
that.
would love that so
I make
much.
plans.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
I have just so many like examples of profound things that have come through in our readings, things that were just like meaningful, things that were kind of funny and very specific evidence. So, I mean, I could talk for hours about readings and how much they've meant to me.
oh my goodness, this has been wonderful, and people will enjoy. I think it's very uplifting to each other to hear people's stories,
Yeah.
and to me personally, I have so enjoyed this and bringing back those, reminding me, because
Hmm.
again, I forget. So it's always nice,
Yeah.
and to hear about Mark, like him being an actor, because
Hmm.
I like in readings how I just get like a glimpse of them or a little bit about them, and so it's always so fun to it kind of feels like meeting somebody for a little bit and then getting part of their story and then getting to hear the other parts of their stories.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know. I felt compelled. I wanted to send you pictures of him, and like, I felt like I wanted to tell you about him because, like, you just met him.
Yeah. I know, to get like the most that soul connection and the most important and intimate messages from them. And so it's
Yeah.
so cool to like hear about them and their lives here, more of
Yeah.
that. So thank you for sharing him with
Yeah.
me and
Oh, of
everybody who
course.